The Smiths had finally found their dream home, a charming house with a white picket fence and a lush garden. They couldn't believe their luck when the real estate agent had shown them the house. The previous owner had left everything in impeccable condition, making it easy for the Smiths to settle in. However, after a few weeks of living in their new home, strange things started to happen. The lights would flicker on and off, doors would open and close by themselves, and the temperature in the house would drop suddenly. The Smiths tried to brush it off as just their imagination, but things started to get more and more intense. They would hear whispers coming from empty rooms, and their children would wake up in the middle of the night, screaming about a shadowy figure in their room. One night, while the Smiths were fast asleep, they were jolted awake by a loud noise coming from the basement. When they went to investigate, they found that the door to the basement was locked from the inside. As they tried to force the door open, they could hear scratching and whispering coming from the other side. Finally, they managed to break the lock and push the door open, but what they found on the other side was beyond their worst nightmares. The basement was a dark, damp space with chains hanging from the ceiling and old torture instruments scattered across the floor. The walls were covered in strange markings, and in the corner of the room was a figure huddled in the shadows. As the Smiths approached the figure, they realized with horror that it was the previous owner of the house, who had been possessed by a malevolent spirit. The spirit had used the previous owner's body to carry out unspeakable acts, and now it was looking for a new host. The Smiths realized that they were in grave danger, and they had to act fast if they wanted to survive. They called in an exorcist, who performed a ritual to banish the spirit from the house. In the end, the Smiths were left with a traumatizing experience and a newfound respect for the power of the supernatural. They left the house and never looked back, warning others to stay away from the possessed house. Dr. Emily Stone was excited to start her new job as the county coroner, but she had no idea what she was getting herself into. The morgue was an old, abandoned building on the outskirts of town, and it had been empty for years. Emily was the only person working there, and the silence was eerie. On her first day, Emily examined the first body, a man who had died in a car accident. But something about him seemed off. His body was ice cold to the touch, and she could swear she saw his chest move slightly. She wrote it off as her imagination playing tricks on her and continued her work. As the days went by, Emily noticed strange things happening in the morgue. The bodies would move on their own, and sometimes she could hear them whispering to her. She tried to ignore it, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. One night, Emily was working late when she heard a noise coming from the back room. She cautiously made her way back there, only to find the bodies sitting up on the tables, their eyes wide open and staring at her. They were alive, but they weren't human anymore. Emily realized too late that the morgue was built on top of an ancient burial ground, and the bodies were possessed by the spirits of the dead. They were angry and vengeful, and they wanted to use Emily's body as a vessel to live once again. She tried to run, but the spirits were too strong. They possessed her body, and Emily was trapped in her own mind, watching as the spirits used her body to exact their revenge on the living. The morgue remained abandoned, and the only thing that could be heard was the faint sound of Emily's voice, trapped inside her own body, begging for release.